Forgiving others can be hard enough, but sometimes the biggest struggle is in forgiving ourselves. The person we know best is ourselves. It's us. We fully know our faults and failings, our doubts and fears. We're all too aware of our brokenness. We often compare what we know of the worst parts of ourselves with what we see of the best parts of the other people around us. And that can compound our feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. In the supplementary video to the right of this one, Nadia Boltz-Weber says that we all know the voice of the accuser, the voice of shame that tells us we are what we have done or not done, the voice that tells me that who I am is wrong. The accuser is the voice that continually updates me on the current distance between my ideal self and my actual self. And that voice, the voice of the accuser, is always playing. We can drown it out occasionally with a quick fix, or we can feel better about ourselves for a while when we've done or said the right thing. But if our acceptance of who we are is dependent on what we do, then that just takes us back to the cycle of grief that we explored last week. The voice of the accuser is what makes us scared to reveal our full selves to others, which takes us back to the quote from Tim Keller that I shared last week. To be known and not loved is our deepest fear. Our deepest fear is that we would reveal something of ourselves that would mean that others would reject us. We fear to share our brokenness, and so we hide and we condemn ourselves. Our emotional mug is constantly being topped up by the illusion that we should somehow live up to a standard, the standard of our ideal selves, and that is not possible. It will never be possible. We long to be fully known and completely loved, but the accusing voice in our heads makes us afraid to reveal our true selves. Now, I'm not advocating that we go and splurge everything about ourselves to others, but over time, we need to build trusted friendships where we can just be ourselves and know that we are loved and accepted just as we are. We need those positive affirmations to drown out that accusing voice in our head. As a Christian, I know that the most powerful place we can find that affirmation is from God. People often have the wrong image of God. They think of him as some angry and judgmental God setting impossible standards and then punishing us for not living up to them. But that's not the God of the Christian faith. The Apostle John summed it up in one of his letters when he wrote, God is love, and those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. God is loving and forgiving. If God were not forgiving, then the amount of brokenness in our world, with all of that going on, his emotional mug would be erupting like a volcano all the time. God's love doesn't require us to say sorry. He forgives us always. He forgives us as his love cannot hold on to the hurt that we do to him and to our fellow humans. He longs for restored relationships with all humanity, but instead of coming into his light and receiving his forgiveness, we prefer to hide in the shadows, the accusing voice in our head, making us afraid of condemnation. To be known and not loved is our deepest fear. The second supplementary this week is a wonderful mime or dance that depicts the story of God's relationship with humanity. In a beautifully artistic way, it shows us the consequences when humanity turns away from God, and also revealed God's longing for that relationship to be restored. Our attention is often drawn to the young woman in the dance who represents humanity, but take a moment to notice what the young man representing God is doing on the left of the screen. He never gives up on her, never condemns her, and finally steps in at the right time when she is seeking him, but the accusing voice in her head is holding her back. Jesus was God incarnate, God with us here on earth, and the religious authorities got really annoyed when, amongst other things, he was pronouncing God's forgiveness. Even when they killed him in the most gruesome way imaginable, then we still hear on the cross, we still hear him crying out, Father, forgive. There is nothing we can do that would make God love us less. And when we get the fact that we are fully known by God and that we are loved and accepted exactly as we are, then it can help us to forgive ourselves. It sets us free. But back to Tim Keller, it liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. That's why there's often a sect in our church services for us to confess our brokenness before God. That's not because God needs to hear it. He already knows and has already forgiven. And it's not because we need to beat ourselves up for not being our ideal selves. We never will be. We confess our brokenness because it names the elephant in the room that we place between us and God. Naming our brokenness gives us the confidence to step out of the darkness into the light, to step out of self-condemnation into loving acceptance. Sometimes the voice of the accuser in our head can seem so strong, and that's when it can help to have a more formal individual confession. Personally, I know how liberating that was on my own faith journey, to bare my soul before a priest and to hear them proclaim God's forgiveness, affirming that I was loved. It was just an incredible life-giving experience. But confession like that is not something everyone feels comfortable doing. However, it can help to know that there's a power higher than us, a power greater than us, a power that knows us, loves us, and forgives us. And if you think it would help, maybe please watch the 4th supplementary video for today. I know there's a lot of videos in this one day, but you've got a couple of days to process this before we start on week 4. So please take the time to work through these videos. Because when we know God's forgiveness for ourselves, it is so liberating. When we know that we are fully known and completely accepted as we are, when we receive the touch of God's love more fully in our lives, then we find our emotional mug being filled with positive qualities and attitudes. St. Paul identifies the fruit that God's love produces in us as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And as those fruit, those positive qualities grow in our lives, our emotional well-being blossoms. And they also help strengthen our forgiveness muscles, and we find it easier to let go of hurt. They help to keep our heart soft, and they help to thicken and toughen our skin. That does not mean that we become our ideal selves. Sarah can definitely confirm that I am frequently grumpy and still broken and messed up. But I know that I am also loved and accepted by God and by Sarah most of the time. And when I come back to God again and receive again the touch of his love, experience again his grace, the grace that Nadia talks about in the 3rd supplementary video of today, that grace, when I know it again, I am reminded that I am enough, that God's love fills me with those positive qualities again that soften my heart, help me to let go of my anger, and armor me against the hurts that life can throw at me. And that all sounds great, but how do we deal with those difficult people in our lives? How do we manage the people that deliberately or inadvertently seem to go on hurting us? Well, we'll explore that together next week when we look at relational well-being. I hope you can join us.